Well, good morning and good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to today's CFS47 side event on agricultural solutions for food security, nutrition, health, and climate change and climate challenges. My name is Eiji Kawamura, and I'm a active fruit and vegetable grower in Southern California. Sometimes you might say I'm an urban farmer, or I'm a farmer in an urban area. And it's my honor and pleasure today to serve as the moderator of this event. I want to begin by thanking the Committee on Food Security for selecting this program as an official CFS75 side event. And importantly, I also want to acknowledge and thank our partner co-organizers, which include Argentina, Australia, Netherlands, United States, Global Farmer Network, Global Dairy Platform, and the Private Sector Mechanism, PSM, and our group Solutions from the Land. And we really deeply appreciate all the contributions that our many co-hosts have made in support of this event. And we hope and trust that you'll find our program to be not only valuable, but a little enlightening too, as we talk about some of the new ways that agriculture can be appreciated, and more importantly, how agriculture is needed in this decade and century ahead. Our 75-minute program today will feature presentations by 4 farmers, diverse farming backgrounds, who will share their experiences in deploying systems and practices that provide high value, near-term and scalable solutions to the many, many challenges the world faces today. Those of us that are growers, we see them every day, new challenges, old challenges. We find ourselves just making sure we can get our products to market. And sometimes that market in this current pandemic suddenly disappears. And so we know that we're facing a lot of uphill battles, but at the same time, we have tremendous experience behind that to address that and to be flexible and to be able to pivot and turn. And the presentations today will consist of brief reviews of the many goals, practices, and outcomes of their different operations, as well as how these farmers and their strategies and successes can shape their different landscapes and give them the kind of results that are needed so much. Then we will be followed after these presentations by a question and answer discussion period that allows participants to really give their perspectives and their practical experiences and share with us those different successes that they have on their integrated landscape and on their that's level solutions that they have in those landscapes, in those integrated landscapes. First, but I would like to just have a few housekeeping notes. Due to the large number of participants today, we do have quite a few joining us, and welcome everybody. It's just great to have a global audience that is zooming in today. So today we're operating in a webinar mode, which will allow you to pose questions to the panel members in your Q&A box. I know due to the limited amount of time, I'll make some abridged introductions right now of our producers, our multiple farmer group here, and then we can get right to it. Our first presenters, let me describe them all, is Karol Kissane, a dairy farmer and Nuffield scholar from a small village called Asdy in the southwest of Ireland. Karol worked off farm for a number of years before returning to farming in 2013, converting the family beef farm to a dairy farm. He is currently milking 100 cows in a spring-based calving system. Our next speaker would be Ruramiso Mashumba, and she is a young woman farmer from Marondera, Zimbabwe, who grows snap peas, maize, whole brown rice, sorghum, millet, gum trees, and raises pigs. She's a member of the Global Farmer Network and is the founder of Manandi Africa, an organization that helps rural women combat poverty and malnutrition. Edgardo Ramirez from Argentina is an agricultural engineer, and his great experience in both being a former technician of the National Institute of Agriculture Technology of Argentina is going to be seen today, and he's a member of the Global Farmer Network as well since 2018. And Trey Hill is a fourth generation corn, wheat, and soybean producer from Harborview Farms, Rock Hall, Maryland, with some snow on the ground out there today. And so with no further delay, Karol, why don't you go ahead and start us off, and then we'll be going through these different presentations and then get to our questions and some polling questions as well. So Karol, go ahead.
Thank you, AJ. Can I get the next slide, please? Yes, as you said, I'm from a small village called Asti, which is in the southwest of Ireland. It's a spring-based calving system I have, so therefore my cows calve in February and March. They go to grass as soon as the weather permits, and they stay out grazing until they are dried off in November. My farm here is about 70 hectares, of which about 20 is in forestry, and the rest is in permanent pasture. Where I am based is a higher rainfall area, so we see about 1.5 meters of rain every year, and my farm is on the side of a hill. So taking into consideration the rainfall, the different slopes on my farm, and the actual soil type I have here, the only thing I can realistically grow is grass. If I was to try growing tillage or vegetable, chances are that I would quickly degrade my soils, and they'd probably end up being washed into the Atlantic Ocean. Next slide, please. So what am I doing on my farm that is relevant to today's topic? Well, from a biological point of view, there are a number of things. First off, traditionally here in Ireland, dairy farmers grow perennial ryegrass. Now this grows very well in our climate, but it requires constant addition of artificial nitrogen to get the most from it. I've been trying to reduce this input on my farm over the last number of years. And one way I've been doing this is by setting what we here call multi-species grasses. Now this picture you see here is from a paddock I set in multi-species last year. You can probably see there's more than just ryegrass. There's plantain, there's chicory, there's a number of legumes, and there's other grasses included. The legumes, such as clover, fix nitrogen naturally from the air and mean I don't need to spread as much artificial nitrogen to grow the amount of grass I need for my cows. Added to this, the likes of chicory and plantain are deeper rooting than perennial ryegrass, so they're actually breaking up the compaction in my soil and adding more carbon and life to it. Now, in this part of Ireland, most of our farms are made up of small fields, and the boundaries of most of these have hedgerows. I'll be very conscious to make sure that I look after these hedgerows as well as possible, as an abundance of wildlife, including many nesting birds, live in these. I would fence out from the likes of these hedgerows and from any ditches and streams that run through my farm. Now, by doing this, it gives wildlife a chance to live here, and many different plants that we would probably call weeds, such as nettles and thistles, are free to grow in these areas. Now, these support an abundance of life, like caterpillars, butterflies, and many, many other different types of insects, which are so important to the life cycle of the many different wild animals we have living here on farm. Next slide, please. But it's not just from a biological point of view I look after my farm. I also consider what technology can do for me. So I keep a very close eye on what genetics can do. And from this point of view, I'm talking about the genetics of the cow I breed on farm. I try to make sure that I can, as efficiently as possible, turn as much grazed grass as possible into milk solids. I'm looking for a cow that will calve once every 365 days. Now, here in Ireland, there's been a lot of work done building up a huge database of information on animal breeding, which is very, very valuable for us farmers to access and to help us in making our breeding decisions. Over the last number of years, all my slurry has been spread by low-emission slurry spreading techniques. This means the slurry is more injected into the ground than just being sprayed with splash plates into the air. And this results in over an 80% reduction in the ammonia emissions when spreading slurry. Plus, I get a much better nutrient uptake. Now, at the moment, I'm actually putting monitors on the cows. There are two reasons I'm doing this. First, it's going to help my heat detection to make sure my cows go back in calf when I need her to. But secondly, and probably more importantly going forward, they will actually monitor the health of the animal. Now, using these, I can get a notification maybe 24 to 30 hours before I see any physical signs of an animal being unwell. And this gives me the opportunity to use treatments such as fluids, anti-inflammatories, and painkillers instead of antibiotics. Now, on farm, I practice selective dry cow therapy, which means only cows that need an antibiotic are dry enough get one. But I want to reduce the use of antibiotics on my farm by as much as possible without impacting negatively on animal health. And I think these can really help me achieve this goal. Also on farm, I would soil sample regularly to make sure that I only spread the correct amounts of fertilizer at the correct time to get the maximum growth for my cows of grass. I would also ensure that the pH of the soil is correct through targeted spreading of lime, as this helps with nutrient uptake. Next slide, please. Another point that we're talking about today is how do we share our learnings on what we're doing with other farmers. And I would say I try to be as active as possible on social media. especially around that indifferent that I'm doing on my farm. I will post videos, pictures, and answer any questions other farmers have. I'm in a number of groups trialing different things, and through these, I will also share my knowledge gained. So take, for example, last month, there was a week-long event on multi-species grasses I partook in. Each day, videos from my farm and another farm went out on how it was working for us. And then each evening, there was a Facebook Live session for maybe 30 to 35 minutes, answering any questions other farmers on this. The top picture here is actually from one such event in 2019, where over 150 secondary school children taking agri-related classes from local secondary schools visited the farm to see what I'm doing here. So unfortunately, looking at the clock, it looks like my time is up. So 5 minutes is very short for an Irish person to talk, especially one from Kerry. So back to you, AG, and looking forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Karol. And now we'll hear from Ruramiso Mashumba. Ruramiso, ready? There you go.
Okay. Good day, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Ruramiso Mashumba, like mentioned. Please, can you move on to the next slide? So agriculture is very important to Zimbabwe because it contributes a great deal in our gross domestic product. But what we have found is that majority of farmers in Zimbabwe are actually living below the poverty datum line. And yet they rely on agriculture as a way of livelihood. Please, can you move on to the next slide? So move on to the next slide again. Those are some of the challenges we have as farmers. We lack access to knowledge and technology. So what am I doing as a farmer? So I've been farming for 9 years now. And when I started farming, I had no equipment. I had to start from scratch. So this is something that's very different farmers in Zimbabwe compared to around the world, where a lot of the times you inherit a farm with some sort of knowledge. So we had to start from scratch and look at how can our unique tools, we have very small farms, how can we commercialize them? So this is why I say we revolutionize communal farming. So what we're doing at our farm is we're looking at how can we use the latest technology to reduce carbon emissions. So something that we are pioneering right now is we're putting in a solar farm. So the solar farm will power our irrigation equipment, will also power everything on the farm. In Zimbabwe, a few years ago, because of climate change and droughts, we've been having power shortages to the extent that we have only six hours of power a day. So we've had to look at how can we continue to remain sustainable as a business, as well as taking care of our environment. So we've gone into to invest in solar irrigation, as well as solar panels to power our farm and reduce carbon emissions, as well as create opportunities for people in the community. So one of the projects that we have done, which is Munandi Africa, which you saw on the first slide, is how can we look at our unique way of farming that most farmers that are around me. I'm on a 650 hectare farm. I'm not sure what that is in acres. So that's quite a big farm. But we're looking at the smallholder farmers that are surrounding us are on 1 hectare pieces of land. How can they also contribute to increasing their yields? How can they also look at how can they reduce carbon emissions? So some of the things that we have done now with Munandi Africa is we've come together with those women in the communities and formed, and together we're doing an equipment sharing scheme. So they're able to hire equipment from us, as well as we're looking at a bigger project of how can we also help them power their systems using our solar farm. So unfortunately, I don't know why the solar panel picture that I posted didn't send, but that's what we're currently doing on our farm, looking at how can we remain sustainable in such difficult times using solar and using precision irrigation. Thank you.
Ruramiso, thank you so much for that presentation. And I think the very important observation you mentioned about this access to knowledge and the enormous amount of knowledge that's available these days compared to just years ago and in our lifetimes. So we'll be talking about that in a minute. Let's go ahead and move on to Edgar Ramirez. Edgar, are you ready? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dave. Good morning, at least for this part of the world. First of all, I would like to thank the Global Farmer Network and FEO for the opportunity to be here. Next, please. I live in Córdoba. Córdoba city is the capital of the province of Córdoba. My family farm is at 300 kilometers from home. We have 275 hectares, and we plant every year 50% with corn, 50% with soybean. And when the dry season led us, we also plant wheat in autumn, always adopting no-till farming technology. Next, please. When I speak of no-till farming, I don't mean just sowing directly. In Argentina, we think the no-till is a system that includes a set of good agronomical practices like never remove the soils and keep them with cover. It's very important to avoid erosion and save water. Balance nutrition of crops, rotations, and not only crop rotations. We need to rotate active principles of phytosanitaries and germplasms. In the farm, we have begun with services crop 4 seasons ago. In general, we plant after soybean hybrid patch and after corn rye. The services crop let us control resistant weeds and improve the fertility of the soils because the biological activity and the carbon capture are permanent. The integrated management of pests, weeds, and disease is also very important for us. Some years ago, we introduced precision agri-technology. It has been a process because there is always something new and always something to improve. This type of technology let us save money and increase the production, the yields. Next, please. The benefits of advantages of no-till systems are many, but I'm going to mention some of them. Reduce soil erosion by more than 90%. As I said before, with cover, with avoid water and wind erosion. Improves physical, chemical, and biological soil conditions. In soils, we can see a lot of earthworms, roots, etc. We have healthy and living soils. Decrease water evaporation. The drop of the rain never hits the soil directly. It hits the straw and then enter into the soils. And if the rain is very heavy, the benefits increase the storage of water and avoid the runoff. Less greenhouse gas emission. Fossil fuel is roughly 60% reduced. We need to spray before sowing, but then with only one pass, we plant, fertilize in the same operation. Also, we need less power in tractors compared to the same work capacity of conventional tillage. Promote soil carbon sequestration. This is now one of the most important things because we can fix carbon from the atmosphere, helping to mitigate the climate change. And at the same time, increasing the levels of organic matter into the soils. For us, this is a virtuous circle. Gives stable and higher yields because we can storage more water and water is available for the crops. Lower operation costs because we save a lot of money in fuel. Shorten working hours at the fields because you spend less time on the tractors working the land. And for us, biotechnology is part of the toolkit. Farmers and agronomists should have it available for the right moment. With tech and agriculture good practices, we can produce food in a sustainable way. Next, please. In the last few seconds, I would like to speak about our experience in transferring knowledge of no-till farming in Western Africa. I'm a member of the Argentina No-till Farming Association, PRESID, and with the support of the African Development Bank, we work in Ghana in 2018. Joined work with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture of Ghana. We planted 4 plots with corn and soybean crops. And the next year, in Guinea-Conakry in 2019, with the help of the Agriculture Research Institute of Guinea, we planted 3 plots with corn and soybean. In both cases, Argentinian technicians were living there, and we had the support of Argentinian companies. Next, please. Thank you, and thank you again to the Global Farmer Network and FAO for this opportunity.
Thank you, Edgar. Yeah, it's very clear that the tremendous advances and the tremendous transitions that all of us have been making in our farms is accelerating. We could have a very robust and dynamic toolbox that continues to grow, and we'll talk about that some more today. I know for all the audience that there's a challenge with using the question function, but at this point, of course, let's just use the chat function within your Zoom meeting to ask questions or make comments. And if we can fix the question and answer component of that, we will, but at this point, we'll use the chat function. So Trey, are you ready to go on your presentation? And then we'll keep on moving.
My name is Trey Hill. So I think we're in I'll use a term from Solutions from the Land, and a digital and environmental renaissance of farming. That made me ponder the question of, what does the Renaissance farmer look like? What does the future farmer look like? And I think he's sustainable, resilient, ecological, climate smart, regenerative, smart businessman, but also just as importantly, an artist. So as we look at the future of farming, we look at folks that are gonna have to fly in and out of ecological landscapes in order to grow food and maintain ecology. Not necessarily the straight delineated lines that we've always had, but more of a flow. I like to think of what I do sometimes, not just in producing food, but also as an art. It's created by the artist, but all we do is plant the seed and allow the piece to create itself, constantly evolving and showing the beauty, but we never save it. We simply harvest it. And it will never be shown again, but we only get so many chances to do this. Next slide, please. So as a child, when I first wanted to farm, I remember going into fields that looked like this with my father. You could feel the soft soil under your feet. It was malleable, it was clean. The lines were clearly delineated between the borders of the field and where the field started. It was the sound of tractors, the smell of soil freshly turned. You could taste it in the air. It's a description that if you talk to any farmer that's experienced this, they can pull themselves right back to that point in life and remember that exact experience with all senses all blowing, just showing that farming is an experience. So it's a whole different profession, I think, than most people do. So if we go to the next slide. So now when I walk in my fields, you can see that this is us planting corn. This is a tractor that's changing the rate of seeds as it goes across the field, as it steers itself and regulates the fertilizer as it goes across the field. When I step in the field, instead of feeling the soft, malleable soil, I feel the crops, I feel flowers, I see the bugs and the bees and the birds chirping. I hear that. It tastes fresh, it smells fresh, and sometimes it even smells like a florist. It's a completely different experience than what I had when I was a kid and what had made me want to be a farmer. So I've had to change everything about the way I think about farming and the way I do farming, from this linear delineated lines to this more abstract thought process where we're still doing the same thing and growing food, and we're doing it well. We're doing it sustainably. So next slide, please. So the canvas that we're painting on, or the medium that we're using, is no longer this monolithic, sterile environment, but an environment that's much alive, and we're embracing ecology and trying to complement it as opposed to control it. So when I look at sustainability, I look at the idea of one's level and desire to make the world better. And I think that as society moves to that, farmers are moving to that as well. But as a farmer, there's so many factors, and it's so easy to just say farmers need to be more sustainable, but you have to look at financial, environment, climate, social, agronomic, and it's very difficult to articulate to folks outside of agriculture what exactly that means. So I made this really nice flow chart in my office last week, trying to explain it so that it would be very simplified. This is it. I was about halfway through and realized that it's really, really complicated in farming to think of sustainability. I'm sure no one can read it, and I gave up. It was pointless to try to articulate what sustainability means to a farmer. And that's why I went to more of an experiential approach. As farmers, if we go to the next slide, as we look at farmers as both an experience and a purposeful life, which I think we all do, try to about how we change it. But then where do we inject technology? Why has this never been done in the history of mankind? And what we need to do is figure out, where can we use data, imagery, chemicals, seeds, GMOs, where do all these things come into play so that we can get closer to the mimicry of the natural world, but also inject technology, which is what is sometimes surprising to folks. And I think it's that blend of the old school the cover crops, the legumes, producing nitrogen to make us more efficient, but also bring in the technology, let's embrace all the things that the world has been able to create so that we can grow food. Maybe you probably ask why would I do this? So we'll go to the next slide. Why we all do it. It's for our kids. So this is me and my kids walking out in the fields now, right? Instead of going into the freshly plowed field with the tractor humming, we go out and scout cover crops. We go out and look at the flowers and we look at the birds, we look at the bees. And if we go to the next slide, this is kind of my mantra. This is what I hang in my office. This is what I tell my kids. That's many small people who in many small places can do many small things that can alter the face of the world. And that sums up farming for me, that every farmer and every person that produces food can have their own little spot, their own little place in the world. But as long as all of us change just a little bit, the face of the world will change. Thanks.
Thank you, Trey. That is a great presentation as well. And I just wanted to mention that it's funny, I have a neighbor, his was born in 1925. He's turning 96 this year. He's still an active farmer. He remembers the names of his horses today. He can tell you the names of his horses that he used to plow his fields. This happens to be my uncle who taught me how to farm. And the thought that within a single lifetime, our farming industry, our farming art, if you will, the art and science of agriculture has just tremendously moved forward. We seldom get a chance to acknowledge just how much of a, I hate to call it a dark ages to a renaissance, as Trey just mentioned, but it's close to that. We had understanding back then and we have understanding today that's tremendously different. We know that the art of agriculture has existed for millennia. And we know that the science of agriculture that we utilize today is finally able to describe some of the art of agriculture. And what we see with that understanding, it's an aha moment for many of us that this new sharing of knowledge, this explosion of knowledge really has created this opportunity for an ongoing and accelerating renaissance, if you will, an age of enlightenment for agriculture and how it fits into the world's fabric, if you will, of the difference between survival and the difference between living. We know that we have to produce enough abundance to give enough choices on this planet to keep us in that avenue and that lane of living. And with that abundance comes the indulgence of having all the choices you can imagine. But the opposite of abundance, of course, is scarcity. And the minute that we see a world with scarcity as a limiting, as a threatening part of the world, that exists. And certainly we do have scarcity on this planet. Certainly we do have challenges to our agricultural systems. That's where we look to these solutions right now, look to this new way of looking at agriculture and embracing it. And in that comes the use of a toolbox that is both physical and mental in about how we go about producing our crops, getting them to the from our fields to the table. And this is a great opportunity these days for us to re-articulate, if you will, in this century ahead, how, for example, in support of sustainable development goals, agriculture is going to have a chance to really plug in and be a part of this change for humanity as we move towards, in the decades ahead, the accomplishment of those very important sustainable development goals. So thank you to all of our presenters today. You can see by those presentations, whether it's a dairy with Karol's Dairy, whether it's in Africa and the tremendous shift and transformation that you've been able to make Ruramiso in your area. And let's definitely acknowledge the important role that women will play in being part of this critical part of our agricultural systems now and in the future. Edgar and Trey, thank you all for your presentations. So what I'd like to do right now, though, is recognizing how far we've come in agriculture. It's more important now to understand that the rest of the public in our country, in the United States, the 99% of the people that are not engaged with agriculture, how are they going to look at agriculture? How can they understand agriculture? And if they can understand it, they can certainly support it better. And so what I'd like to do just with our audience right now is we have a couple questions for you and a polling questions, and we'd like to go ahead and put those up, Kara, and take a good hard look at them. And there's 3 questions here. We'll leave them up here. But the first one is, how important are farmer voices in food system discussions? So often we're talking about the farmers not even being invited to talk about these global food security issues, but more and more, and we're seeing it, we're witnessing it, we're experiencing it. That invitation has become more common, and more importantly, more acknowledged that the voices of the farmers are important. But I'm obviously biased a little bit on the answer to this first question. The second question, just as important, was how would you prioritize the following sustainable development goal agricultural solution pathways? There's so many important components of agriculture that will feed into the SDGs. And in this audience that's listening today, you're one of the smaller percentage of people that even know what the solution, the sustainable development goals from the United Nations are. Our goal, one of our goals, is that how wonderful it'll be when the bulk of the world understands that these are goals that we're moving forward to and are going to try and accomplish by the year 2030. Please do vote on these two. And there's another question, the next question below that. Let me see if it'll come up on mine. The third question is, what are the most challenging tactics to scale up? And in that you have communications, outreach, and education, knowledge sharing, which we talked about earlier, place-based learning, data collection and aggregation. A lot of talk about data collection these days, how important that is to give you a baseline. Decision support tools, research and innovation, certainly, priority needs assessments, and multidisciplinary stakeholder collaboration. So you have 3 questions there, and go ahead and send those answers in. And then Kara, shortly, I think what we're ready to do is go to this, really the important part of our presentations, where we're able to interact and have questions from the audience. And I know one of the first questions we'd like to have, as I understand it, the ambassador, an ambassador from Argentina, Your Excellency, Carlos Cherniak, if you're there, I certainly would love to have you come on, and I think you have a question for us. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Solutions from the Land and all panelists for such interesting and educating presentations that allowed us to learn more about the positive benefits of owner technologies, of new technologies in food production. And this event just walked us through many cross-counting crop drivers. We heard about the advantages of digital solutions to improve crop production, how we can better integrate small-scale stakeholders into local, regional, and global value chains. Great ideas on how we could create synergies between different players and local communities, and even how robotics could help us to preserve natural resources. But I would like to take the deepest look at no-till farming practices. In that line, and following what has been said, it would be fascinating to learn more about your views on how this particular technology could benefit crop production in different regions, notably Africa, and in what manner satellite mapping and digital apps could enhance the performance of family farming producers while integrating them into export mechanisms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And our challenges today are many. Our opportunities are wonderful. We get to see so many new ways of accomplishing the task of feeding a global population. We see the threats in front of us. We look for resiliency, and more importantly, we look for a better handhold with those that are part of our partners in agriculture, and those are the consumers. We really do recognize that as they understand more about what's happening in agriculture, this embrace of our endeavor becomes more important. As we looked at those questions from the polling, I think it was no surprise that the voice of the farmer is something that's very important to be recognized. In the first question. And the second question, not surprising, and Trey, I'm sure you would know this, Ruramiso, you'd know this as well, Edgar also, that the importance of soil health is one of the more important things that we can talk about. Is there a comment any of you would like to make on that, as far as those that second question where soil health became so important? And Your Excellency, thank you again for your comments and your question about this challenge and the opportunity for no-till and low-till and still getting the same good results. Anybody want to talk about that? You guys got your mutes on. Trey?
Yeah, I think soil health is of utmost importance. And I think that a lot of the things associated with water and different things kind of come and get combined into soil health as we make the soil healthier. And regarding the ambassador's question, I think that the no-till and cover crop system is actually a really huge missed opportunity currently in some of the developing countries, because if you can get to where you have cover crops and no-till, you can get away from some of the really difficult manual labor aspects of farming that are often done by women in developing worlds. If we could help develop this no-till cover crop system where you get weed control through natural means, through the crops, through crimping, it's much easier than pulling a plow through the soil. So I think that opportunity is there. And I think the digitization, if you look at Edgar, he's been there with OperaSeed. I've worked with OperaSeed several times myself. Brilliant group. We have brilliant groups in America and Europe as well, all working on the same thing. If we can get some of those techniques, they don't require the big planters that I showed in my photo, but you can do it on a small scale. It's scalable. I think digitization and the opportunity to share knowledge on platforms like this, where we have folks from 4 different continents doing a panel, is an excellent example.
Thanks, Trey. The answers to question 3 came out in a tie, basically, that there was research and innovation being important, and of course, multidisciplinary stakeholder collaboration on whether you talk about innovative collaborations or collaborative innovation. It doesn't matter. It's this idea that we have all kinds of partners out there. Karol, I understand one of our questions was that you have so many new techniques and new things. What is the main obstacle to implement these new techniques, and who carries the cost of trailing and implementing, and do you have some government support? That was a question for you from Keen de Keiser to you.
Perfect, yeah. I would say government support, probably not so much. No, I mean, yeah, one of the things I mentioned there from a technology point of view was, say, the low emission slurry spreading techniques. Now, there was, say, some support there when you were buying that technology, because that was a big outlay. But what I would say here in Ireland we're very lucky with is that there's lots of research is done. So we've got organizations like Chagas, and we've got our universities like UCD, etc. And they do huge amounts of research, say, on what I was talking about there, like the multi-species, on reducing antibiotic use. So all this is actually maybe trialed in these areas for a number of years, and us as farmers have complete access to see what the trial results are. We can actually, like, you could do a Zoom call with one of the researchers, you could ring him up and speak to him about it. So it will give me the comfort, let's say, that these are going to work on my farm before I take the chance of implementing them. So it's not like I'm just shooting in the dark, kind of going, okay, I'm going to try a different type of grass, or I'm going to try spreading my slurry differently, or I'm going to stop using antibiotics on my cows at dry off. There's actually a huge amount of research being done here in Ireland on all this, and it's freely available to all farmers. So I think that's a big plus we have in here in Ireland.
Thanks, Karol. Ruramiso, are you still up there? I was looking for you. There you are. Ruramiso, as far as your
Yes, I am.
As far as your experience in that toolbox, that just the ability to have access to new ways of doing things, and you see this movement towards more efficiency and more application of the tools that are available, what do you see as the most important thing out there for you? Oh, you froze up a little. There you are. Go ahead.
Well, the good thing about being part of these the good thing about being part of these international platforms, now that farmers are coming together, is that there's a lot of shared information and lots of shared experiences. So I think I would say currently what I see in the movement in Zimbabwe is that farmers are really looking at how can they increase their yields. and looking at how can they increase, look at even things like soil health, because for so long we have been tilling our fields, and now we're starting to move to minimum till, not yet completely zero till yet, minimum till, and looking at how we can reduce the amount of soil erosion. So there's quite a lot to pick in terms of what is the most important, but I feel as a farmer that our voices are united, that the experiences that our other farmers have had over maybe more years of farming are really vital to us. So as a Zimbabwean farmer, as a woman farmer, we see that we are not going to go backwards, but move forward in terms of how we improve our farming methods.
You know, as we talked about the challenges for access to knowledge and the transfer of knowledge, it's clear that having access to the internet, access to being able to see some of the new ways or old ways of doing things, how critical is that for you in your area, access and broadband access to the internet and communications?
Well, imagine if we didn't have internet or if we didn't have the tools we have today, we would not be able to share this information as fast as we're sharing it right now. So absolutely, it's very critical. Unfortunately, in terms of development, I think something like this year, the pandemic, since last year, really has exposed a lot of vulnerability in that we were not well prepared in terms of access to technology, because again, still accessing this information is available on the internet, but still access to internet is still something that's very limited in our communities. Before we spoke about internet and technology, we thought that we still have a few years, but it's really critical that we have it now. And being able to, I always share with my colleagues that when I travel, especially to the United States, and visit some of the corn farmers, and I see how they're growing their corn and how we're growing our corn, shared experiences like that are very important. And now with less travel, we need to have more of those available on platforms like this, where we can share information from farmer to farmer, avoid outbreaks, avoid a lot of things that we experience as farmers.
And I know that as we talked about, even using the word renaissance is an interesting word, as Trey mentioned. It talks about the art of agriculture. Let's say it's talked about the science of agriculture, the transfer of information and the new toolbox of knowledge that's out there. I do know that this idea that in opening the door for new knowledge comes a tremendous responsibility, that we were able to share it with each other, that we're able to make access for it. I know that Edgar, we see some different questions on here as well, talking about what are the biggest challenges, whether it's weeds, whether it's different invasive pests. How are you looking at your challenges from the basis of the oldest conflict in the history of mankind, is that there are things that want to eat you or want to eat your crops, they want to eat your animals. How's that look to you and the future for new tools in your toolbox?
Yes, I think that we have to work all together, because the world is one. We are just links inside the big chain, and we depend on the other actors of the chain, and the other actors depend on farmers, because we need to produce in a healthy way, and we know that we try to improve every day at the fields. I think that with our technology, with our system as a no-till farming, I think that we can improve the situation. We can be friendly with the environment. Perhaps we need to speak with another stakeholders and put common targets to work together. I think that this is a big challenge for us. Not to work separately, farmers, consumers, traders. We need to work together and speak the same language.
Great. Thanks, Edgar. I see we have a potential question from Jennifer Harhai. Jennifer, are you online with us currently?
Yes, I am. My video is not on at the moment, but my question is, what are the biggest policy or regulatory changes you'd like to see in your home countries to allow you to take full advantage of some of the technologies and innovations that you described?
That's a great question. Ruramiso, would you like to start with that?
Okay, I would say more freedom to for farmers to push the technology that makes sense to them. I think I would say that I don't have an exact policy yet. I would need to think a little bit about it, but I would say definitely more freedom. Farmers their voices need to be heard more in policy formulation, because we are working on the fields. We know what's best for the work we're doing. So I think that is something that is lacking. We see a lot of academia in policy making and very few farmers in policy making.
That's a great answer there, because so much of what we talk about is instead of from the top down rules and regulations, let's go from actually the producers, the foresters, the farmers, the ranchers. Let them help create the if you will, the guidelines for how we farm. Karol, how about you? What kind of response do you have to Jennifer's question there?
I think I'd probably just reiterate there what Ruramiso was just after saying. I mean, I think that's a huge issue, and especially moving forward, like we've got so many issues in the world today, and the food summit is coming up and everything. And one of the big kind of worries, I think it's a great opportunity, let's say, the food summit, but I think it's a worry as well in one way, is in that if, say, farmers and people on the ground who are actually doing this every day are not involved in the discussion on how to surmount these huge challenges we have today, I don't think we actually will succeed. So I would say, yeah, that thing of having farmers involved, of not only, like I've spoken, about how great it is here in Ireland that we've got like the different universities and different people like trialing these things, we can take it on farm. But like it needs to be almost like in partnership, because it's all good saying a controlled environment and saying, oh, this will work. But I mean, when you go out to people's farms, they're so different and they're so variable, and your soil type and your climate and everything is different, that yes, that part of working together to formulate policy and regulation really needs to be taken into consideration going forward. So I think that would be very, very important.
And that's really what so much of this discussion today is about, is the difference between 20th century farming and 21st century farming. We were talking about moving out of a dark ages, if you will, into a new age of agriculture. And I hate to use the word dark ages because it implies a negative. We were existing and doing the best we could with the tools we have, but now we have new ways of doing things and new tools. And I think that's very important. Edgar, how do you feel about this and the roles that government can also play, and these other collaborators out there, the innovators and collaborators that we need?
Yes, I think that we have to share knowledge, but as Ruramiso said, perhaps I know that farmers need to be heard, but the problem is farmers as autocritical, you know? Farmers should involve more in policy, because in general, technicians, farmers are always thinking about our problems, our job, our situation, the climate, the rains, the temperature, the forecast, prices. But sometimes we have to leave the farm to enter in the urban process and to join with policy and make policy, because sometimes we say that the rules, in general, the rules don't let us produce as we want. And in general, also here in Argentina, we have a lot of taxes because we are farmers, and this is a problem too. So I think that we have to go to work together.
And that flexibility is so important. Trey, I'm going to come back to you, but what I'd like to do right now, we do want to talk and listen to these issues, but Dr. Mendez with the Argentina Department of Ag has a presentation for us right now. We're going to roll that, and then we'll come right back to our discussion here and then wind things down. So go ahead, Kara, and thanks, panelists, but let's go ahead and look at this presentation from Dr. Mendez. I think it's rolling.
Technology to be able to produce more and more efficiently. Our goal is to produce with more efficiency, and we try to achieve this by tracing the crops and gaining knowledge and data about what is being done in the field with more sustainability. This means a better use of the soil, crops, farm equipment, and everything that may affect society. There are two main aspects that we are starting to develop in our area. One is to look for the current problems in farming that have no solution yet and then try to find a technological solution to it. On the other hand, we try to make this solution suitable for a better competitiveness in the market. What we have done, speaking on behalf of the Department of Technological Innovation, was to summon all the technological companies or AgTech here in Argentina. Around 100 companies appointed and were divided into groups: digitalization of agriculture, marketing platform, control software and robotization, productive innovations, genetics, industry 4.0, and technological improvements. We have placed them in these categories, but they may actually be related. We also have designed AgTech ecosystems. So far, we have developed around 10 of them, and they have been generating more competitiveness in the area. This example that I am about to show you concerns the particular problem of farming areas near or next to urban zones. What we want to achieve is to produce in a healthy way so that there is no pollution left. Our goal is to be able to produce as near as possible to urban zones without any kind of harm or threats to the population. So, we searched for the suitable companies and businesses and designed working schemes or working prototypes. For example, we designed this prototype along with a company that developed sensors that apply herbicides only where weed is present, and another company that has a weather station that analyzes if the spraying can be carried out according to the weather conditions. This is done automatically. It doesn't depend on a human being that may apply the product despite the weather conditions. This machine stops it, notifies a warning to a cell phone, sends its exact position, and it also says who is the person in charge of the incorrect spraying. In this way, we have traceability, improvements in weed control in presence of crops, nanotechnology, and robotics. Here you can see the prototype we built. These prototypes are covered so that there is no possibility of applying the product if it has a high delta T. This will notify and record if the temperature is high, also the speed of the wind and humidity. All these data are fed to the weather station present in the machine and finally decides if the spraying can be carried out. If it is not convenient, it won't go on. Hence, this has no drift at all. Furthermore, all the sensors that you can see over there are capable of identifying green biomass and will spray only over weed. In this way, we have reduced the application of herbicides in a 90%. We spray effectively only where it is needed and only where it can be done, using smaller tanks and with no drift. You can easily put this machine in a shelter if you need. That is also a strong advantage. It records all the points of every position in which it was functioning. All this data is traced, recorded, and digitalized. The robots that we are currently using and testing are similar to the prototypes that you have seen, with the difference that these also can be turned into sprayers, seeders, fertilizers, or everything we may want a robot to do. This robot displayed in the screen has an electric engine. It doesn't require any fuel, so that there are no emissions. The carbon print is highly reduced, and the water print is highly efficient because the robot will kill only the weed. Hence, every inch of water used will be available for the crops. Finally, we decrease our expenses, apply less herbicides, the soil is healthier and stronger, Carbon print is better because we don't use fuel. There is direct seeding. Argentina has adopted direct seeding up to 90%. Water print is also improved. We encourage circular economy, among other advantages. It also stimulates creativity in the area, bring better opportunities to the younger generations, and job positions that will be of great interest for all the Argentinian farming sector. We hope we can eventually export these services to other places all over the world. We are now trying to trace crops and beans to differentiate them because there are specific markets to which Argentina is currently not selling to and where the price of the beans could be tripled. In order to be able to sell in these markets, we need a fully digitalized farming, and this is something that we are capable of doing now. To conclude, we are detecting problems and suggesting solutions. We look for technological improvements and also suggest these improvements. We also develop many different working environments that come up with solutions, just like the one concerning farming near urban areas. But there are many others, such as family economy and marketing and working platforms, so that small farmers may commercialize their production. We design working protocols for every scenario and carry out feasibility analysis. Finally, we think about how to facilitate the investment in these equipments. On behalf of the department, I thank you all the opportunity to leave this message, and we are more than willing to cooperate with you. Thank you, and see you soon.
And thank you to Dr. Mendez for that presentation going over the exciting and new innovative tools that are available. Every time we talk about a toolbox, I think I mentioned this a few minutes ago, we know this toolbox is very robust, it's very dynamic. It is partly psychological what's in the toolbox, but of course it's very hands-on, the new tools that are available. I know in my own fields this next year, we have a chance to, believe it or not, use a nanobubble, oxygen bubble technology to see if that might help enhance the growth of microbes within the soil and give them a little better feed of oxygen. There's a chance we also might have a chance to experiment with a hydrogen fuel cell tractor, which you can find in Europe evidently, but nowhere in the United States as of yet. But these are kinds of things that we talked about maybe 20 years ago and just nodded our heads, say, well, that would be interesting. But now all of a sudden, because we can imagine it and because the technologies are advancing so quickly, we have access to these new tools and these new technologies as they mature, and more importantly, as they become commercialized. I know that we had hoped to have some more questions here. In fact, there is a question I'd like to ask. Do we have Steve Zwick online? And Steve, I think you had a question.
I'm here, yes.
Go ahead and ask your question then.
Well, yeah, my question was just about some trends that I seem to perceive, and I just wanted to, I'm trying to find out if they're accurate or not. I know when I spend a lot of time in Kenya, and it seems like there's a lot of people who are moving from Nairobi out to the countryside, people who maybe their parents, maybe they were born on farms, they grew up in the city, they're moving back to the rural areas, and they're buying farms or picking up the family farms and approaching it as a lifestyle thing where they are, I mean, these are real farms, real businesses. They're trying to make a go of it. They're not giving up their city jobs, but they are bringing money and technology back to the rural areas, including solar pumps and things like this. And I'm wondering if this is a trend across Eastern Africa, and if it is, what are the implications for sustainability? Because there's also this whole issue of urban-rural divide that we have in the U.S. And I think somebody mentioned only 1% of people in the U.S. have experience in farming. I've just found that this marriage, this connection to the farming world, seemed to be really important for for supporting farmers and promoting sustainability. So I'm wondering if this is just the people I happen to be bumping into, or if this is a thing, and what the implications might be.
Thanks for that question. I'll take it over to Ruramiso in a second here. Ruramiso, if you're ready for that, to talk about what you see over in Africa in your areas. But I will speak for, as an urban farmer in Southern California, I do know that there's a huge movement, and it is a global movement, of being able to produce agricultural products in really unusual places, whether it's I farm on an abandoned airport, military airport, and on an old golf course that was abandoned as well. I farm on vacant lots in between buildings. And what we see is, even if you don't have access necessary to open land, there's vertical agriculture and horizontal agriculture and all the different aquaculture, hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics. There's a whole new slew of other kinds of ways to produce food on the top of a building or down in a basement. So we know that there's new tools being introduced all the time, and they're available over the shelf where you can order them online and basically gear up a building in just weeks or days even. It's kind of that kind of an explosion of new opportunities. Ruramiso, what do you see about that in your area? Are there a lot of people coming back out to the farm?
Okay, so my parents grew up in the rural areas, and but when my parents got educated, they moved into the city. But then they later on moved back into a rural area to farm. So what I'm seeing is there used to be a few years ago, a few decades ago, maybe a move for people to move into the city and have a better life. But people are now realizing the potential the land has. So we're seeing a lot of young people looking for land in the rural areas and wanting to farm. Again, like you mentioned, maybe similar, we also have people even in the cities who are looking for abandoned land and growing. There's a rise in urban farming as well. So people are not I wouldn't say people are removed from agriculture. People are very much in touch with farming. I think our statistics are quite high in terms of people who live in the rural areas already, and very few people live in the cities. And people are seeing that there is a lot of potential in farming in the rural areas. So it could be slightly different from East Africa and Kenya, where the earlier speaker mentioned, but in Zimbabwe, we're seeing a rise in farming. And all this has to do again with technology, with awareness and rebranding agriculture and telling a story of potential that agriculture has. It's really helped a lot.
I think we see that with this a new surge of interest, if you will, in agriculture that does open the door for the best and the brightest to show up and start to be, again, a part of our agricultural systems. I know there's a question from Rodney Cook out there. Rodney, are you still online here, and are you able to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. Going back to Argentina, first of all, thanks Edgar Ramirez for the very good presentation on your work in Cordoba, but also the work you're taking to Africa. And it's a question about conservation agriculture, zero-till, no-till, which has a lot of supporters in different countries, but a major headache in many countries is weed control. And my question to you is, to what extent, either in your Africa locations or in Argentina, you need to use herbicides for the zero-till, especially when we listen to Dr. Mendez there with his more targeted herbicide applicator, to what extent you're calling on those technologies. Thank you very much.
Edgar?
Yes, you're right. You need herbicides to control weeds. So the idea with the cover crops or with the services crop, as we call now, is to reduce the amount of or the quantity of chemics that we can use at the field. But when we work in Africa, I think that the no-till system in Africa has a lot of opportunities. As we work with live things like seeds, plants, first of all, we need to work, introduce, and adapt the technology locally. Because the interaction between crops and environment are not the same in the different regions. We always say that we couldn't copy and paste the way they produce here in Argentina in other parts of or another countries. But the no-till farm is a process that take at least 4 or 5 years to establish. In that process, we can test different techniques. What we saw in the video of Andres Mendez is technology that is very, very new here in Argentina, and it's not working in massive way. It's available, but not enough proof. But the way that we are working is in that sense to apply the minimum necessary, but we have to apply the sanitaries in the field. And we work here with only with green and blue label of toxicity products. This is one of the points that we try to do in all the parts of Argentina. The same happened with the fertilizers. We have we should fertilize because we don't remove the soils, so we don't put the nutrients. We have to apply what the crop or what the soil needs. But this is a problem that we have in general with people who say that we have to produce in organic products, and we think I personally think that if we need to produce food for 6 billion, 7 billion, I don't know exactly the amount of people in the organic way, it's impossible. We need to produce with chemics.
Thank you, Edgar. You know, there's been a couple questions about just the need for cooperations and cooperatives in between farmers themselves. And I thought I'd ask the panelists, we only have time for a little bit more, but Trey, how do you see the interaction and the cooperation between farmers, between industries, between government? It's a broad question, but I thought you have a great experience on the other side of on the East Coast there. How are you seeing that cooperative nature of agriculture starting to improve or actually deteriorate?
Well, I don't know. You probably experienced this as well, where farmers live in highly densely populated areas. It's usually viewed as a negative. For me, it's actually been pretty positive. I work with all the local environmentalists. When I started my career 20 some years ago, the environmentalists and the farmers were enemies. They felt we were polluting the water. We felt we were doing a good job. The truth is always in the middle, right? So we started working together, started listening to each other, came up with solutions. I'm on the board of the local river keepers. And what we do is, as a group, is try to work with farmers, myself included, to come up with projects that make the water cleaner. So in my little microclimate of Maryland, I know that it can work, but it's difficult to demonstrate. So we do lots of research on the farm. One thing I've had to do is make my farm more transparent and open it up so that people could take readings and help me learn, but also be willing to face the truth, which has been a difficult one for me. But I think it can work. As far as the farmer cooperation, like I said, I have a network of farmers around the world, which is crazy. You know, there's European farmers in the same movement. I know farmers in France. I know lots of farmers in Argentina, actually. I've flown down there. They're the kings of no-till. It's all no-till down there. So I've gone down there and learned a lot about no-till in Argentina and cover crops in Europe and how to use less chemicals from the European farmers. And then I offer the North American perspective within those groups. So to me, it's very positive.
Karol, quickly, do you have a comment on your the cooperative nature of agriculture in your area? And quickly, because I think we really do only have a few minutes left.
Yeah, I'll go as quick as I can. Yeah, I would agree everything there now that Trey has just said. Like, I mean, and I think even thinking about, if you look at the SDGs and think about the one, like all of them are important, but SDG 17 and working together on that, I mean, that's what's really needed for us to move forward and again get over all those problems that we can discuss. Is like everybody needs to come together and work together. And I was actually struck yesterday, like it was one thing that our chair of CFS said when he was summing up the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. I took a note of it. He said, in the real world, no policy and guideline is 100% perfect. There is pros and cons. And I mean, all involved in discussion got to remember that. Like, I mean, we can all have a perfect idea of what agriculture should look like, but that doesn't work on the ground. We've got to have give and take. And if we do, we can all work together to a better world for all. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruramiso?
Definitely for us, cooperatives are how we can farm better, because most farmers are smallholder farmers. So if we're looking at all this technology that's out there and adapting it, we will need to work as cooperatives. So it's something that's big right now and has a lot of potential and opportunity. And also hearing the stories of how it's worked in other countries is really a reminder that cooperatives are very important.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And Edgar? Okay.
Yes. I think that the cooperation is very important for farmer to farmer. For example, in Argentina we have about more than 30 years of no-till, but during this time we made a lot of mistakes. Our idea is, when we share the knowledge, is to avoid people who wants to enter in our way of production to make the same mistakes. We have the solution. Obviously that we have new problems in the future and we don't have the solution now, but we have to work together to look for these solutions. I think that if we share knowledge, we can make the distance shorter. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. And in winding up here today, I've been fortunate to work with a group called Solutions from the Land, which is a group of farmers, ranchers, foresters, some of the greatest associates and friends that I've been able to meet in a lifetime here of work. You see that there's a tremendous surge of interest in agriculture. There's a tremendous opportunity for agriculture. And as we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a tremendous need for agriculture to step up and be a part of this solution for the world going forward. In fact, I know Solutions from the Land actually has a report that's coming out today to talk about this agricultural renaissance. And as Trey mentioned, this renaissance is all of mankind moving forward into the 21st century. It's an opportunity for us to rethink what it is we're trying to be as a community on this planet. It's an opportunity for us to recognize that sustainable activity in every category is becoming more and more doable because of this cooperative nature, if you will, because of the increase in the robust toolbox, the release of knowledge and the access to knowledge. And so with that, I know that we believe that the pathways forward are just about ready to, if you will, emerge onto the scene. And all of us have a chance then to really rethink the role that agriculture will play in the future. In closing, I want to thank our co-organizers here today, Argentina, Australia, the Netherlands, the United States, the Global Farmer Network, the Global Dairy Platform, and of course the private sector mechanism, the PSM folks out there that have made this possible today. Everybody, I just appreciate all your views, and you guys are the best, being able to share with us your experiences and your optimism for an exciting future. So with that, I know we'll bring this to a close. Please do keep in touch and look out for our report, the Solutions from the Land report. It's pretty exciting what we think is happening, and we certainly know that we're all partners in this together. So thank you, everybody. Have a great season, great harvest, and again, thank you to the hosts and to this very important movement on food security and the solutions that are important for the future. I appreciate it. Take care.